At 3:04 a.m., Adrian Cole froze in the middle of his kitchen. Not because he couldn't sleep, but because, behind the pantry door, someone was breathing. Shaky. Fast. Panicked. Adrian stepped closer. The house had 40 security cameras, a private night guard, and enough motion sensors to spot a fly. But the pantry was one of the few blind spots because Halden insisted it didn't need surveillance. He'd agreed without thinking. He regretted that now. He reached for the handle, hesitating for half a second, and something scrambled backward inside. A child. Adrian yanked the door open, and the entire world narrowed to a single image. A little boy, maybe 10, crouched on the floor, tears all over his face, hands covered in cold pasta, shirt too big, sleeves rolled, a ripped Spider-Man pajama top, shaking so violently he could barely breathe. The kid screamed, dropped the container, and shielded his face with both hands. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please don't hit me. Please don't fire my mom." Adrian's chest cracked open, but this time, he actually reacted. He dropped instantly to his knees, hard enough that his palms slapped the tile. Not a dramatic gesture. A reflex. Like someone punched the air out of him. "Mateo," he whispered, voice breaking. Hey, look at me." His thoughts slammed into him all at once. How long has he been this scared? How did I not see it? How did this happen under my roof? What else have I been blind to? He forced his breathing steady so the kid wouldn't panic more. "Mateo, I swear to you, I'm not here to hurt you." "No," the boy sobbed. "Please, I didn't mean to steal. I'm hungry," she said. "She said if you caught me, you'd throw us out." "She?" Adrian asked quietly. "Who said that?" Mateo clamped his hands over his mouth like he'd already said too much. Adrian softened his voice instantly. "Listen to me," he said gently. "You're not in trouble. I just want to understand." Mateo curled tighter. "Yes, I am." She said rich people hate thieves. Adrian's jaw clenched, but his voice stayed calm. "Look at me," he said again, softer. "I'm not angry. Tell me what's going on." The boy swallowed, breath hitching. "Mom didn't eat," he whispered. "She fainted after her shift. She's been coughing so bad. She tried to cook, but she dropped the pot, and we didn't have anything else." The words tumbled out like he'd been holding them in for months. "So I came down here. But I wasn't supposed to. Miss Halden said if she ever caught me taking food again, she'd tell you we were ungrateful, and you would." His voice broke. "Kick us out." Adrian felt the ground tilt under him. Halden, his house manager. He had known she was strict. He did not know she had turned fear into a weapon. Adrian spoke slowly. "Mateo, why did you hide in the pantry instead of eating at the table?" The boy wiped his nose on his sleeve. "Because if I sat at the table, she'd see the crumbs in the morning. She checks. Always." He swallowed. "And because last time, she locked me in here." Everything in Adrian went cold. "She what?" Mateo pointed at the latch on the inside frame. "She turned that. Stayed there until I stopped crying." Adrian had to look away for a breath. Just one. Because if he didn't, his anger was going to swallow the room. He didn't want the kid to see that anger and mistake it for anger at him. "Mateo," he said softly, "come here." The boy shook his head. "I'll get in more trouble." "No," Adrian said. "Not again. Not ever again." "You can't promise that," Mateo whispered. "You're not the boss of her." That sentence hit Adrian like a punch. He was the owner of this estate, CEO of a billion-dollar company, a man with enough power to crush corporations. But somehow a 10-year-old believed Halden outranked him. "Mateo," Adrian said firmly but gently, "I am the boss of this house. Not Halden. Not anyone else. You're safe with me." The boy stared at him, desperate to know if that was true. Adrian extended his hand. This time, Mateo reached for it without collapsing into panic, though his fingers trembled violently. His hand was freezing. Adrian lifted him carefully and brought him to the kitchen island. "Stay here," Adrian said. "I'm getting you something warm." Mateo flinched. "Don't tell her." "I won't," Adrian said. "And you're not eating cold leftovers on the floor ever again." He warmed the pasta, plated it, poured juice, and placed everything in front of him. "Eat," he said softly. Mateo stared for a second, still expecting a trap, then ate like someone who hadn't eaten properly in days. Adrian refilled the plate. He didn't ask permission. He didn't hesitate. When the shaking finally left Mateo's hands, Adrian asked, "Are you going to tell her?" "No," Adrian said, "but I need you to tell me the truth." Mateo hesitated, then lifted his sleeve. Bruises. Small. Faded. Finger-shaped. She gets mad, he whispered. A lot. How long? Adrian asked. Since we moved in. And your mom? Mateo's voice cracked. She cries at night. She works until she can't breathe. But she's scared to stop. Miss Halden says if mom complains, we'll get kicked out and end up back where we belong. Adrian closed his eyes. Not sadness. Not shock. Guilt. When did your mom last eat? He whispered. Yesterday morning, Mateo said. She gave me her part. Adrian stood. We're checking on her right now. Mateo panicked. Don't wake her. She'll get in trouble. No one gets in trouble tonight, Adrian said. Not you. Not your mom. He grabbed his keys, took Mateo's hand, and walked fast through the hallway. The further they walked, the more Adrian noticed details he'd ignored for months. Cold air drafting under doors. Paint peeling by the vents. Dim bulbs. Furniture older than half the staff. Rooms smaller than storage closets in the main house. His stomach churned. He reached Lydia's door. Knocked. Mom. Mateo whispered. No answer. Adrian pushed the door open. Lydia lay curled on her bed, still in her uniform, blankets kicked off, forehead drenched with sweat. Mom. Mateo rushed to her. She stirred weakly. Maddie? Why are you? You shouldn't be in here. If she sees. She won't, Adrian said. Lydia blinked, confused. Mr. Cole? Why are you here? She tried to sit up, but collapsed into a coughing fit that shook her entire body. Adrian stepped forward immediately. When did this start? He asked. I'm fine, she whispered. Just tired. Please, don't fire me. Adrian knelt beside her. Lydia, you can barely breathe. If I take a sick day, She's not in charge, Adrian said. I am. Lydia tried to shake her head. That's not what she said. She said you told her to keep us quiet. That you hate excuses. Adrian felt the floor tilt under him. Halden used his name to enforce her cruelty. You're going to the hospital, he said. Lydia panicked. No, we can't afford it. You're not paying, Adrian said. Ever again. He lifted her gently. She weighed nothing and carried her out of the room. Mateo ran beside him, gripping her hand the whole way. Mom, please wake up. Please, he whispered. In the car, Lydia drifted in and out, coughing, mumbling apologies. Adrian tightened his grip on the steering wheel. This wasn't poverty. This wasn't bad luck. This was neglect happening under his roof. Neglect he had unknowingly allowed. He drove faster. When they reached the ER, Mateo ran alongside the stretcher as doctors took Lydia inside. Adrian stayed until Lydia was stabilized. Stayed while Mateo cried himself out. Stayed until the doctor came back and said the words. She's going to be okay. Mateo collapsed into Adrian's side. Adrian wrapped an arm around him, awkwardly, unsure, but gently. Thank you, Mateo whispered. For what? Adrian asked quietly. You came, Mateo said. Nobody ever comes for us. Adrian swallowed hard. He had never been more ashamed of himself, or more determined to fix everything. Because this night, the pantry, the fear, the bruises, the lies. This was not the house he thought he ran. And tomorrow morning, everyone would find out exactly who did. The hospital waiting room was too quiet. Mateo sat curled in the plastic chair next to Adrian, feet dangling above the floor, hands wrung tight in his lap. Every few minutes he glanced toward the hallway where the doctors had taken Lydia. Is she going to be okay? He asked again. Yes, Adrian said, even though he was praying the same answer into existence. Mateo leaned into him slightly, not fully, just enough for Adrian to feel how small he actually was. When the doctor finally returned, wiping his hands on a clipboard, Mateo stood instantly. She's stable, the doctor said. Severe respiratory infection, dehydration, and exhaustion. Her body has been under stress for a long time, but she's responding well. Mateo burst into tears, silent, shaking sobs. Adrian placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Can I see her? Mateo asked. You can, the doctor said, but only one visitor at a time. Mateo rushed down the hallway. Adrian stayed behind. He stared at the floor, jaw tight. Halden starved these people, threatened them, controlled them, took their money, locked a child in a pantry, and worst of all, she did it while using his name as the weapon. Mr. Cole doesn't like excuses. Mr. Cole punishes laziness. Mr. Cole hates complainers. Mr. Cole will fire you if you speak up. Every lie she told grew into a cage his staff believed. He didn't build it, but he left it standing, and that was enough. When Mateo returned, wiping his face with his sleeve, Adrian stood. "She's sleeping," the boy whispered. "She said she's sorry she didn't finish cleaning the dining room." Adrian closed his eyes. "Come on," he said gently. "I'm taking you home. We have things to fix." The drive was quiet at first. Then Mateo whispered, "Are we fired?" "No," Adrian said instantly. "Absolutely not." "But Mom said." "Your mom was scared," Adrian said. "I would never fire someone for being sick. Ever. Holden lied to you both." Mateo looked out the window. "Why'd she lie?" Adrian considered his answer. "Because people like her only know how to lead by fear," he said. "If you're scared, she's in control. If you trust someone else, she loses power." Mateo looked at him. "So we were never in trouble?" "No." The boy stared ahead. "When we get home," Adrian said, "I want you to stay upstairs with me, in one of the guest suites, until your mom gets discharged." Mateo's mouth opened. A guest room? For me?" "Yes." "But those are big," Mateo said, like he was describing another planet. Adrian smiled faintly. "You'll manage." Mateo didn't smile back. He looked torn between excitement and fear. "Miss Holden said we're not allowed to use the upstairs bathroom," he whispered. "She said we dirty things." Adrian gripped the steering wheel harder. "You can use any room in that house." "Any room. Understand." Mateo nodded, still unsure. When they pulled into the driveway, the estate looked peaceful from the outside. Lights glowing warm. Lawn perfectly trimmed. Everything spotless. But inside, Adrian saw it differently now. Each perfect corner hid the suffering of the people who made it perfect. He walked inside with Mateo close behind. The night guard, Simon, stood at the foyer. "Oh, Mr. Cole," he stammered. "Is everything alright? Where's Holden?" Adrian asked. His tone made Simon stand straighter. "In her office. She's been pacing." "Good," Adrian said. "She can pace while she packs." Simon blinked. "Pack, sir?" "Yes," Adrian said. "She's fired." Mateo's eyes widened. Simon's shoulders sagged with relief, so visible it was painful. "Sir," he whispered. "Thank you." Adrian nodded once and headed down the hallway. Before he reached Holden's office, he stopped. He knelt so he was eye level with Mateo. "You stay right here," he said. "I'll come back for you." Mateo hesitated. "What if she comes out?" "She won't," Adrian said. "Not after tonight." The boy nodded. Adrian stood, turned, and walked toward the office. He didn't knock. He pushed the door open. Holden jumped in her chair. "Mr. Cole, I wasn't expecting." "You're done," Adrian said. "No softening. No build-up. Just truth." Holden blinked like she couldn't process English. "Sorry. Pack your things," Adrian said. "Right now." Her face twisted. "This is about Lydia, isn't it? That woman has always exaggerated." "She's in the hospital," Adrian said, "fighting for her life because she was too scared to rest." Holden opened her mouth. He cut her off. "You starved her, stole from her, hurt her child, locked him in a pantry, and you did all of this while pretending you were acting on my orders." Holden's mask cracked. Her voice sharpened. "That little rat lied to you." Adrian leaned forward slowly. "Mateo didn't lie," he said. "He showed me the bruises." Silence. Holden's face drained of color. Adrian kept going. "You used my name to run a dictatorship in my home. You made people believe I hated them. You punished them for being human." She stood suddenly, chest heaving. "You don't understand what it takes to run a house like this. You're never here. Someone had to keep order." "Order isn't cruelty," Adrian said. "Order isn't terror." She took a step toward him. "You fire me, you'll regret it," she hissed. "These people need fear. Without it, they'll walk all over you. They'll get lazy. They'll—" Adrian didn't raise his voice. "Pack your things." For the first time, Holden looked unsure. She tried again. "You can't just—" "Pack," Adrian repeated. "Security will escort you out." He turned and walked away. Holden shouted after him. "You'll destroy this house. You'll drown in complaints. You'll—" Adrian shut the door behind him. He didn't want to hear another word. Adrian returned to the main hallway. Mateo was exactly where he'd left him, standing small and tense. "What happened?" Mateo whispered. "She's leaving," Adrian said. "Tonight." Mateo swallowed. "Is she gonna hurt someone?" "No," Adrian said. "Not anymore." Just then, two other staff members, Denise and Raul, appeared, drawn by the raised voices. They saw Mateo standing behind Adrian. They saw the look on Adrian's face. And they knew. "Is she gone?" Denise asked softly. Soon, Adrian said. Raoul exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. Sir, he whispered, eyes watering. Thank you. Adrian didn't respond. He didn't know how. Because part of him wasn't proud. Part of him hated that he was being thanked for removing a monster he didn't even know he'd hired. He walked Matteo upstairs. For the first time, the boy didn't flinch when climbing the grand staircase. He followed Adrian into one of the guest suites, a warm room with a big window and a soft bed. This is yours, Adrian said. Matteo stared around like he'd entered a hotel lobby. For how long, he asked. For as long as you need, Adrian said. The boy walked slowly toward the bed. His fingers brushed the blanket like it was made of glass. You don't have to sleep on the floor tonight, Adrian said softly. Matteo's throat tightened. I never had a bed this big before, he whispered. Adrian nodded. You deserve one. When he tucked Matteo into bed, the kid didn't pull away. He looked up at him with tired, red eyes. You're not mad about the leftovers? He whispered. Adrian shook his head. Matteo swallowed. Then why were you shocked? Adrian sat on the edge of the bed. Because I never thought I'd see a child hiding in fear of eating in my own home, he said quietly. And because I didn't know how badly I'd failed you and your mom. Matteo didn't answer. He just looked at him. Really looked at him. Like he was trying to understand what honesty sounded like. I'm glad you opened the door, he said finally. Adrian brushed a strand of hair off the boy's forehead. So am I. Matteo's eyes closed, and within minutes he was asleep. Adrian stood in the doorway, watching him breathe. Then he whispered something he had never said out loud to anyone. I'm sorry. Not to the air. Not to the empty hallway. To Matteo. To Lydia. To every person he'd allowed to suffer under Halden. And to the version of himself who had been asleep for far too long. Adrian didn't sleep. He sat in his home office as dawn broke over the estate. At 7 a.m., he called every department head, every supervisor, every long-term staff member. He scheduled an all-staff meeting at noon. And when noon arrived, the dining room was packed. People stood shoulder to shoulder, whispering, nervous, hopeful, confused. Matteo sat in the front row. Adrian walked in. He didn't carry papers, didn't bring notes, didn't stand behind a podium. He just walked to the center of the room and spoke. Last night, he said, I found my maid's son hiding in my pantry, terrified to eat leftovers. Gasps, hands over mouths, tears instantly forming. He told me what's been happening to him. To Lydia. To all of you. People shifted uneasily. Some dropped their gazes. I didn't know, Adrian said. But that doesn't mean I wasn't responsible. A hush fell so deep you could hear the air conditioning hum. That changes today, he said. Because I won't let fear run this house again. I won't let anyone suffer under my roof again. And I will never let a child starve or hide in a corner again. Someone choked back a sob. Another whispered, Thank God. Adrian continued. From now on, you eat when you're hungry. You rest when you're sick. You speak when you're scared. And you will never be punished for being human again. The room broke. Not into applause. Into tears. People crying. People hugging. People finally letting go of months, years of tension. Adrian waited until the waves settled, then added, I already fired Halden. She will never set foot on this property again. A ripple of relief went through the room, like oxygen returning to lungs long collapsed. And finally, Adrian said, when Lydia returns, she will take over as house manager. A massive, stunned silence. Then, a cheer. A real cheer. People clapped, cried, shouted her name. Matteo smiled, so wide his cheeks hurt. Adrian stood there, taking in the sound. He realized he wasn't just firing a villain. He was waking up a house that had been asleep in fear for years. And for the first time since his wife's death, Adrian felt alive. After the meeting, people didn't go back to work immediately. They stayed, clustered in small circles, whispering, processing, letting the news sink in. Some cried openly. Some laughed in relief. Some simply breathed deeper than they had in months. Matteo watched all of it from his chair. For once, he wasn't scared of being noticed. He sat beside Adrian, tiny legs swinging, clutching a cup of warm cocoa someone had handed him. It was the first time he'd ever sat in the dining room without fear gripping his stomach. 3 days later, Lydia came home from the hospital. She was still weak, but she could walk. Matteo never left her side. When they entered through the staff hallway, every worker stood waiting. Someone had decorated balloons, handmade welcome back signs. A table covered in casseroles, soups, fruit, and flowers. Lydia stopped in the doorway and covered her mouth. What is all this?" she whispered. Denise stepped forward. "This is for you." Raoul added, "You kept us alive. Now we keep you alive." Lydia cried. Not a quiet cry. Not a scared cry. A relieved cry. The kind that breaks open years of held breath. Mateo hugged her waist tight. "This is your house too," someone said from the back. "Always has been." Lydia wiped her face, still overwhelmed, when a voice spoke gently behind her. "Come with me." She turned. Adrian stood there. He gave her a small nod and gestured down the hallway. She followed him to the room she'd been shown earlier, the room with sunlight and real heat and air that didn't taste like mold. Except now, something else was inside. A small desk, a lamp, a new phone, a laptop, a neat stack of folders, the tools of a house manager. Lydia touched the desk gently, fingertips trembling. "You didn't have to do all this," she said. "I did," Adrian replied. "Because you were doing the work long before you had the title." Lydia turned toward him fully. "Why me?" she whispered. "Really?" Adrian didn't hesitate. "Because when everything collapsed, you held this place up," he said. "Even when you broke yourself doing it." She blinked rapidly. "And because your son trusted you enough to risk everything for you," Adrian added. "That says more about the kind of leader you are than any resume ever could." Lydia pressed a hand to her mouth again. "But I don't know anything about running a house like this." "You do," he said softly. "You just weren't allowed to." Her eyes softened. "And you're sure about this?" she asked quietly. "You want me managing your home?" "No," Adrian said with a faint smile. "I want you fixing it." She let out a small laugh, wet and shaky. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll try." "You won't have to do it alone," he said. "Not anymore." Later that evening, after the welcome dinner, Mateo wandered into the kitchen. He paused at the open pantry door. For a moment, one long, heavy moment, his breathing hitched. His hands shook. His feet didn't move. The memory wasn't gone. Adrian entered quietly behind him. No footsteps. No pressure. He stood beside the boy without saying a word. After a few seconds, Mateo whispered, "I still feel scared when I look inside." "That's normal," Adrian said. Mateo swallowed. "Does it ever go away?" "Fear?" Adrian asked gently. "Maybe not all the way, but it gets smaller every time you do the opposite of what fear tells you." Mateo tightened his grip on the doorframe. Then, breath trembling, he stepped inside. Adrian stayed still. Let the boy take his time. Mateo touched one of the shelves, ran a hand across the cereal boxes, opened a drawer, checked the corners. Eventually, he turned around. "It doesn't feel like a cage anymore," he said quietly. Adrian nodded. "Because you're not trapped now. You're in control." Mateo walked out and closed the pantry door, gently, without flinching. "Can we get ice cream?" he asked suddenly. Adrian smiled. "Absolutely." Over the next few weeks, the house changed in ways no one expected. Not expensive renovations, but human ones. Adrian ate dinner in the staff hall once a week, not as a gesture, but because he liked hearing about people's lives. He learned Raoul had a daughter in nursing school. Denise was saving to open a bakery. 2 cleaners were cousins who dreamed of traveling. One housekeeper had a secret obsession with K-drama fanfiction. He learned Lydia was actually funny when she wasn't terrified. Sharp-witted, dry humor, told stories with a spark in her eye. He learned Mateo was good at math and terrible at sitting still. He learned that working with people wasn't a burden. It was grounding, sometimes healing. One night, Adrian overheard a few workers talking in the kitchen. "You think he'll go back to being distant?" "No." "Why not?" "Because he looks happier now." "Yeah, he does." He walked away before they saw him smile. The bigger changes came slowly, but steadily. Adrian hired an outside auditor to review every part of the household operations. He sat through meetings about maintenance schedules, staff supplies, and salary structures, things he'd always dismissed before. He asked questions, listened carefully, made adjustments. He insisted staff get 2 consecutive days off instead of staggered shifts. He brought in a counselor once a month for anyone who wanted to talk. No pressure, no judgment. He installed cameras in blind spots, but only facing public hallways, never private rooms, to prevent abuse, not violate privacy. He added emergency buttons in the staff wing so anyone unwell could call for help immediately. He fixed the HVAC, replaced mattresses, upgraded safety rails, even bought better uniforms, not because it mattered to him, but because it mattered to them. And people noticed. The house felt alive again. Not perfect, but safe. For the first time in a long time. A few weeks later, Adrian visited one of his factories unannounced. He saw things he didn't like there too. A supervisor yelling. A woman hiding her lunch because she was afraid to be seen wasting time. A younger worker limping on a twisted ankle because he was afraid to report it. Something in Adrian shifted. He saw Mateo in every hallway. Every frightened worker. Every quiet face. Every person who shrank to avoid punishment. He changed company policies the same week. Mandatory breaks. Sick leave. Anonymous reporting. Independent inspections. The board complained at first, but the employees didn't. Adrian didn't care about shareholder discomfort. He cared about people. For once. And the numbers didn't drop. In fact, productivity went up. Someone on the board joked, "Looks like kindness is good for business." Adrian didn't joke back, because it wasn't about kindness. It was about responsibility. One afternoon, months after everything began, Adrian walked into the kitchen and found Mateo sitting at the island with a bowl of cereal. Not hiding, not scared, not waiting for permission, just eating, like a normal kid. "You ready for school?" Adrian asked. Mateo swallowed his mouth full. "Yeah, I like it there." Lydia entered behind him, hair tied neatly, new house manager badge on her shirt. "He got an A in math," she said proudly. Mateo rolled his eyes. "It was fractions." "Easy." Adrian grinned. "Show off." The boy smirked. Everything felt settled, safe, different, better. Adrian poured himself a cup of coffee. Mateo watched him for a second, then said something he hadn't said before. "You know, I don't feel scared in this kitchen anymore." Adrian paused. "Why's that?" he asked. "Because you opened the door that night," Mateo said. "And you didn't yell. You didn't hit me. You didn't tell me I was trash." He shrugged softly. "You just helped me." Adrian felt his throat tighten. Mateo added, "That's why your reaction shocked me. I thought rich people didn't, care." Adrian took a slow breath. "I didn't care enough," he said honestly. "But I do now." Mateo smiled, small but real. "Good," he said, "because now you're kinda stuck with us." Adrian laughed. "Yeah," he said, "I think I am." A few nights later, Adrian walked past the kitchen again at almost the same time as before. 3:03 a.m. He paused, listened. Nothing but quiet breathing from upstairs. No fear. No hiding. No child eating cold leftovers in the dark. Just peace. He opened the pantry anyway, just to check. Inside was nothing but food on shelves and warm air from the newly fixed vent. He smiled, shook his head, and closed the door. As he walked back upstairs, he passed Lydia in the hallway doing a late-night check. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "Just checking the pantry." She gave him a knowing look. "Old habits," she teased gently. "Just making sure," he said. She patted his arm. "He's fine. We're fine. You did good." Adrian nodded. When he reached the staircase, he paused, turned back to her. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for staying." Lydia smiled softly. "We're not scared anymore," she replied. "That's why we stayed." He nodded once, then went upstairs. And for the first time in years, Adrian slept. Not because he was exhausted, not because his mind shut down, but because he finally felt like the kind of man who deserved rest. If you enjoyed this story and want more inspiring lessons like this, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss one.